Last Sunday, we studied the Gita Dhyana Slokas, those 9 beautiful, inspiring verses which tell us about the greatness of the Gita, the greatness of the teacher of the Gita, and the greatness of the one who composed the Gita in the Mahabharata. Today we begin the study of the 2-page introduction to his commentary on the Gita by Shankaracharya. It is, as I said last Sunday, beautiful Sanskrit prose, simple, crisp, conveying a profound message. He begins this introduction with quoting a famous verse from the Purana. Narayana paro avyakta andam avyakta sambhavam andasyantas time lokaha saptadvipa cha medini. The verse says, Narayana is beyond avyakta. Within the avyakta is the anda, brahmanda, the cosmic totality. It has come from that avyakta. Within this cosmic totality are the various universes, stellar systems, including the earth in which we all live. They all come from that one original divine pure consciousness known as Narayana. So Narayana is a name for the supreme divine pure consciousness, infinite and non-dual, out of which the universe has come. Vedanta gives us a beautiful truth that this universe has come in a series of evolutionary steps: cosmic evolution, organic evolution, later on human evolution. All this evolution is only to unravel the profound truth hidden in this cosmic process, that is Narayana himself. We have various mythological representations in India of this cosmic evolution. Narayana is Vishnu lying on a bed of a serpent. You will find pictures. It is a beautiful artistic representation of a profound cosmic truth, that repose is when all the cosmos has been withdrawn into that primordial divine reality. There it is in repose. Sankhya philosophy speaks of the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas, in their equipoise as a state of dissolution. And when there is a stir and disturbance within the 3-4 gunas, then the universe begins to evolve. These are the cosmological ideas, Vedanta, which are so close to modern cosmology as well. This from Narayana has come. Avyakta, nature in its undifferentiated form, is avyakta. In the beginning, everything was undifferentiated. And from undifferentiated to differentiated is called evolution, cosmic evolution. So avyakta, undifferentiated, and vyakta means differentiated. So from Narayana came avyakta, undifferentiated nature. From that undifferentiated nature came this tremendous ball of fire, which is called Brahmanda. We call it the cosmic egg in simple translation. The egg contains within it all the possibilities of the future chick, Similarly, that infinite cosmic egg contained all the possibilities of future cosmic evolution. We call it Brahmanda in Sanskrit. Andam avyakta sambhavam, that undifferentiated nature came to a differentiated, unified form as Brahmanda. Out of that unified form came further differentiations in million forms as this universe in which you and I live. The starry systems above, the earth, later on plants, and then the human beings. These are all differentiations of one undifferentiated, infinite, pure consciousness. But these are the stages through which this evolution came into the state in which we find it today. The word Avyakta and Prakriti. Prakriti is the word for nature. In Vedanta, we have an extra cosmic reality. Everything is one single reality out of which everything else has come. The unity of the background material is a common truth in modern cosmology as well as ancient Vedanta. Only modern cosmology deals only with the material aspect, the physical aspect of that ultimate background material. Vedanta deals with the consciousness aspect, more subtle aspect of that background material. But otherwise, evolution is from undifferentiated to differentiated nature. And when the world becomes dissolved once again, it returns back in the same way backwards. From the differentiated, we go to the undifferentiated. Ultimately, it merges in the supreme Narayana, or the divine reality. The world comes from God, exists in God, goes back to God. God used in the sense of not an extra cosmic reality, the totality of all that exists. That is how the Taittiriya Upanishad presents the nature of the ultimate reality. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. Brahman is Satyam, truth or being. Jnanam, knowledge or consciousness. Anantam, infinity. That is the nature of the ultimate reality. That reality has a personal aspect and an impersonal aspect. Together constitute the totality of reality. So when you paint it in human terms, in our mythology and art, you find Vishnu lying on the serpent, and from his navel a lotus comes out. On the lotus is Brahma, the Hiranyagarbha, the totality of the cosmos in its unitary form. That Brahma projects the whole universe out of himself. That's the nature of evolution in Vedanta. Nothing extra cosmic, nothing supernatural. The whole is nature, both in its ordinary form and its extraordinary form. These are some of the great ideas coming from our philosophical and spiritual tradition, which are so much in tune with modern approaches, except in details. We get more details today of this cosmic and organic evolution, but the trend is the same. So he said, this Narayana is the origin of the universe. The universe subsists in that reality. It will go back to that same reality. This is the invocation of Shankara before commencing his introduction to the Gita. Having said this, the text continues. Sa Bhagavan Srishtvedam Jagat Tasya ja sthithim chikirshuhu Maricyadin agre srishtva prajapatin pravritti lakshanam dharmam grahayamasa vedoktam. Having projected this universe, that divine Narayana felt that something must be done to help to maintain this universe. You build a building, you also arrange for its maintenance. So that primordial reality not only projected this universe, Remember the word projection, not creation, but projection. A potter takes clay, shapes it, makes a pot. That's creation. Here it is not so. From the same reality, the universe has come. So Upanishad compares this cosmic process to a spider bringing out web out of itself, makes a web and lives in it, withdraws it into itself, or a fire burning. So many sparks fly out. There is another example of this cosmic process. So from that point of view, this Bhagavan, this supreme divine personality, having projected this universe, Srishtvedam Jagat, tasya cha sthitim chikirshuhu, desiring to keep it in even order, on even keel, as we say about a ship. What did he do? Prajapatin agre srishtva. He projected Prajapatis and gave them a philosophy by which they are to live and conduct their affairs here. They are the primordial divine forces. What is the nature of that philosophy? The agre srishta pravarti lakshanam dharmam grahayamasa. The philosophy of action, philosophy of endeavor. If you want to maintain this world, you must have action, what you call process. All action, process, all belong the same idea. So, philosophy of outward action was given to a set of minds known as Prajapatis, primordial divine personalities. Then, Tataha, after that, knowing that this alone is not enough to maintain this tremendous sense of activity, outgoing process, that's not enough to maintain the world. So, Tataha, Anyamscha, Sanaka Sanandanadin Utpadya, Nivritti Lakshanam Dharmam, Jnana Vairagya Lakshanam, Grahayamasa. He projected the four Kumaras. They are called primordial divine children. And a philosophy of withdrawal from action, inwardness, meditation, consisting of or strengthened by jnana and vairagya, knowledge and renunciation, was imparted to them. They are called the Kumaras. In Sanskrit, Kumara means a child. Up to the age of 12, children are called Kumaras. That is masculine. Kumari is feminine. So, children of the spirit, they were created, projected, four of them. Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, Sanatkumara. They are the four primordial children of the spirit. They never took part in the external processes of the world. They were busy with trying to understand the deeper self, the Narayana hidden in the heart of all. So they were inward looking, meditative, whereas Prajapatis were outward looking, active. These are called two processes, pravritti, nivritti. Pravritti is outward action, nivritti is inward contemplation, inward penetration. So these are the two groups of entities or persons who were projected in order to maintain this universe on even keel. That is the first sentence. Anyamscha, Sanaka Sanandanadin Utpadya, Nivritti Lakshanam, Dharmam, Jnana Vairagya Lakshanam, Jnana and Vairagya. Knowledge and dispassion. I don't want anything external. I want to realize my own infinite nature. That inwardness is called this nivritti. It is strengthened by knowledge and spirit of renunciation. That was the quality of these four Kumaras. Now, having done this, the world will be on even keel if these two philosophies function in the world. External action, inward penetration. So summing up this teaching, Shankara continues, Dvivitho hi vedavakto dharmaha pravritti lakshano nivritti lakshanascha jagatah sthiti karanam praninam sakshat abhyuday nishresa hetuhu. That's a profound observation. The Vedic dharma, philosophy taught in the Vedas, is of twofold nature. One is called pravritti, the other is called nivritti. Dvitho hi, the word he in Sanskrit means it is well known, verily. So it is so well known that the Vedic dharma is twofold. One is called pravritti, the other is called nivritti. Action, contemplation. Jnana Vairagya says, pravritti lakshanam nivritti lakshanascha jagatah sthiti karanam. Both are needed to maintain this world on even keel. If you only have pravritti, there will be trouble. If you only have nivritti, there will be trouble. If both are there, there will be no trouble. Action, contemplation. Both must go side by side. That is a profound observation. And in the Vedic philosophy, you find the emphasis both on action and on contemplation. In the Gita, Krishna is going to expound that philosophy unifying action and contemplation for a fuller life, for fulfillment of humanity. Action is needed for our daily life, eating, drinking, dress, housing, comfort. All these come out of action only. Action in the sensory world, on the sensory plane. That's called pravritti. Very important process of human development. But is it enough? In today's civilization, we have plenty of pravritti. Action, action, action. But it is creating trouble, tension, unfulfillment, mental tension, social tension. These things come when you emphasize only pravritti. Always act. Go out of yourself. Out of that has come today's consumerist civilization, full of tension within and unfulfillment as well. We are seeking for some other, what you call, palliative to reduce all these tensions, because we neglected the other aspect of man's total development, is inwardness. He must know what he is. He must understand his own true nature. I know all about the world. I know nothing of myself. That's not a very good situation. So pravritti alone is not enough. Nivritti also must be there for a total human development and fulfillment. Today's human condition brings before us the limitations of the pravritti philosophy. It is necessary but not sufficient. The man in a world of pravritti without any touch of nivritti will be unfulfilled man. About more than a century ago, famous German philosopher Schopenhauer wrote in his book, The World as Will and Idea, a sentence which is so relevant to the conditions obtaining today. Schopenhauer said, when men achieve security and welfare, now that they have solved all their problems, they become a problem to themselves. Today, man is his own problem. He has no external problem, especially in the highly developed world. But he himself is a problem to himself. There you find the need to bring in the philosophy of nivritti. That is why there is a tremendous urge in the modern age for understanding this philosophy of nivritti with its technique of meditation, inwardness, etc. 60, 70 years ago, in the West, nobody cared for meditation. Today, millions are in the practice of meditation. Why? Because this lack is being fulfilled. We know all about the world. We don't know anything about ourselves. When the great Greek teacher and person who conveyed a profound message gave this message, man know thyself. Oracle of Delphi. Man, know thyself. That is also very necessary for us. It's not enough that we know about nature, about the cosmos. We control it. We build a highly technical civilization. This also is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, we should develop one-sided humanity. If only nivritti is there, it will be one-sided. There will be poverty, there will be suffering, privation, everything will be there. If alone pravritti is there, again there will be trouble. This kind of unfulfillment. So this sentence of Shankara's introduction is a very important sentence. Dvito hi vedokto dharma. Dharma, philosophy taught in the Vedas, has two dimensions. One is pravritti, the other is nivritti. Both are integrated, harmonized in a unifying philosophy of life and action, which you are going to get in the Gita later on. It was Aldous Huxley who said, the old civilizations depended entirely on nivritti, and they created only what you call a wise fool, he calls it. Modern civilization knows all about pravritti, and this has created the intelligent fool. We know all about the world, we know nothing about ourselves. The other person knew all about himself, he didn't know anything about the world. So wise fool, intelligent fool. Why should there be a fool at all? Why not be intelligent, wise men and women? That needs this wonderful philosophy unifying pravritti and nivritti. The yoga philosophy of the Gita is a perfect harmonization of philosophies of pravritti and nivritti. So he says, Dvito hi vedokto dharma pravritti lakshano nivritti lakshanascha jagatah sthiti karanam, for stabilizing this world. How? Praninam sakshat abhyudaya nishreyasa hetuhu. This unifying philosophy brings to all beings. Prani means all beings, not only men, also animals. What do they seek? Abhyudaya nishreyasa. They want social welfare, worldly welfare on the one side, spiritual freedom on the other. For all beings, these are needed. For man, we need it more. Animals, we need much less. But this is absolutely essential. I must have freedom. Every animal loves freedom. Man also loves freedom. But the nature of that freedom comes from a deeper level. We call it nishreyasa, moksha, spiritual emancipation and freedom. The other is eating, drinking, comfort, what they call in the Indian context, third, we call anna, kapra, makan. Good. Food, shelter, clothing. These we need. In the West we call it social welfare, welfare state. You need not struggle. Work hard, create wealth, share it, enjoy the world. That's called welfare state. So that's called in this Sanskrit language abhyudaya. Awakening, developing in association with other people. That little prefix abhi has got a tremendous meaning. Udaya means welfare. Abhi means welfare together. You and I together. All human development is collective development. Alone we cannot do. If agriculture is not supported by industry and both by administration, there will be never development at all. There is need for cooperative endeavor for civilizational development. So the word Abhi stands for that kind of a cooperative endeavor, a teamwork to bring about happiness and welfare. That's why highly developed societies are also highly integrated societies. Without that integration between man and man, you can't develop material welfare. So the word Abhyudaya is a very meaningful word. That development which comes by man cooperating with other human beings. What a beautiful idea. If I am living alone on an island, I don't care for anybody else. I can have my own way of life. But When I am in a society, I have to deal with other people, care for their welfare as well. Just by cooperation, mutual help, we build up culture and civilization. Therefore, Abhyudaya is the first product of human action, of pravritti philosophy. Then comes Nishreyasa. I may have all the comforts of life, but I may not be fulfilled at all. I may be full of sadness and sorrow, tension. I may commit suicide. Something is wrong with me because I have not touched another aspect. That's called Nishreyasa. Shreyasa means welfare. Nishreyasa means supreme welfare, spiritual freedom. I want to be free. Even the poorest man, even a beggar, seeks freedom. If I have ordinary material welfare, I may not have it like a millionaire, but I will have it just enough to maintain myself. And then I want freedom. I don't want to be handled by somebody else. That freedom is a very essential. Freedom of the human spirit. That comes from inwardness. That's why this combination, pravritti, nivritti, brings you abhyudaya, nishreyasa. Pravritti brings you abhyudaya. Nivritti brings you nishreyasa. A little inwardness is necessary. What is my true nature? Let me sit and be alone. All creativity comes from stress on nivritti. The more inward you are, the more creative you are. The more outward you are efficient, but creativity will die. When I was in Washington a few years ago on my lecture tour, I came across a big book called The American Handbook of Psychiatry, written by several authors. Towards the end of the book, there is a section by Silvano Arriti and other authors on creativity and how to foster it. I was surprised to find a statement there that our children in America are quite efficient at work, but they are lacking in creativity more and more. We must bring creativity to them. How to do so? A very interesting section. I have quoted it in that book I referred to last Sunday, Divine Grace, the words of Silvano Arriti, how to enhance creativity in children. Strangely, the first thing that Silvano Arriti says is children must learn to be alone, not always in the crowd. Creativity cannot come if you are always in the crowd. You must learn to be alone and you must enjoy it. That's why in English we say alone is a beautiful word. Loneliness is not a good word. When you cannot tolerate aloneness, therefore you become lonely. So loneliness is not creative. Aloneness is creative. So he says, let children be taught to be alone and enjoy being alone. Secondly, too much of talking, too much of external scattering of energies, a little gathering is needed. Then other steps also are suggested, of which one is something very difficult for us even to appreciate, but it is there, the capacity to believe. We have too much the capacity to disbelieve today. The will to disbelieve is very strong today. That has made us almost like cynics. Most people are cynical, intellectuals are cynical, even children becoming cynical. Therefore the authors say, and they use a very, very strong word, children must be able to develop the capacity for gullibility. Generally we condemn gullibility. You are a gullible fellow, we say. But the authors say gullibility within limits is good. Believe until you are able to say it's not correct, or you have to prove it is correct. But a certain capacity to believe is essential for creativity. That's the language he has used there. So several such suggestions are given. Too much of capacity for unbelief has made for the intellectual inertia, inertness, of mind today. Cynicism is the spiritual death of man. It comes from too much of unbelief. The little child has belief. There is creativity in that child. We want to purify that creativity of all that is small, of that is what you call childish in it. So in a grown-up person also, the capacity for belief is essential. So the word is encourage gullibility in children is mentioned there with necessary safeguards. So here is a study where all that you call methods to encourage creativity is included in that one word, nishreyasa, and what you call inwardness, nivritti, meditation. When you are in meditation, you are alone, but you are never lonely. So also you are gathering all your energies within. You are in search of some profound truth. All the greatest truths of art and religion come from meditation, from the inwardness of man. So today's civilization, rich as it is, but shaky, will become richer and more stable when it adds this value of creativity coming from inwardness and meditation. That is why a total philosophy must include trust on action, trust on silence and contemplation. Gregariousness is not good for creativity, nor for inward stability. Today too much gregariousness is there. That should not be there. Even Bertrand Russell, speaking of children's education, mentions this: children must be made to enjoy being alone. That's a beautiful idea. So, how to make human beings creative? By being alone, by meditation, by inwardness. And then, when you come out into the world of pravritti, you will be a richer person, more able to dig affections in other people. The Vedantic way of inwardness has a profound truth behind it. The more you go from the ego, the deeper levels of your personality, you come across something infinite in you, something unrestricted by the organic system. You are able to expand your understanding of other people, loving other people. A bigger man comes out of a smaller man. That's the true meaning of inwardness. That's the true function of meditation. We knock away the little I, the little ego, realize our infinite dimension. This is the way of human development, human growth. All these material developments, if they do not help us to grow inwardly, they become absolutely harmful. But if they can be made useful to suggest man to go inward, they become very worthwhile as well. So, in modern thinking, this idea is slowly entering. Human evolution is an inward evolution, not an outward evolution. In biology today, we speak of organic evolution having achieved its maximum development in the evolution of the cerebral system in man, the most versatile organ, with the help of which you can invent any instruments you like, any organs you like the wings of the aeroplane, far better than any bird's wings, invented by the brain of man. So this organ is primary. Once nature gave you this organ, then you must trace evolution not at the organic level, but primarily at a trans-organic level. What is the trans-organic level? And biology says psychosocial evolution. Evolution has risen from the organic to the psychosocial level. Psychosocial level means this psyche, which is centered in the ego, caught up in this organic system, breaks away from that integument of the organic system. It expands in sympathy, compassion, love to embrace millions of psyches in society. That is ethical, spiritual growth of man, development of man. Human evolution has essentially that ethical, moral, aesthetic, spiritual evolution. He has no more to develop wings or any other organs in the body. So organic evolution becomes spiritual evolution. Even this organic evolution also is spiritual, according to Vedanta. Spirituality has two dimensions, organic level, transorganic level. A baby develops the ego. That is its evolution. But when you grow older, you are able to transcend the ego and realize your oneness with all people. That is real development of man. And so, this subject of man's growth from the physical, organic limitation to the freedom of the spirit, with the capacity to expand in love and compassion, that's a wonderful idea common to the great philosophies of India and modern biology and neurology. Shankara says here, through this Abhyudaya Nishreyasa combination, we achieve a stable social order in which stable human beings also will be there, peaceful within, and sending out peace outside as well. Because there is no peace within me, I throw out waves of hatred. Today, the world is suffering from crime and violence, all these things. It is a beautiful idea that the world got from the UNESCO preamble, a political document containing a profound spiritual truth, and that is, since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. How to make this mind peaceful? It must go beyond the organic system, beyond the ego, into a larger self. That is the spiritual growth of man, without which no stable civilization is possible. In 1939, just before the outbreak of the Second World War, I read in the paper of a lecture by one intellectual by name Dr. Josiah Oldfield in London. He was speaking on war and internationalism. One sentence struck me very much in that speech, where he says, more wars are caused by bad-tempered people seeking to discuss peace measures than by good-tempered people seeking to discuss war measures. It is a wonderful idea. A Gandhi, a good-tempered person, when he has a war, it is a non-violent war. But if it is a Hitler, quite different. If it is the Treaty of Versailles, it is different. They were all war-minded people sitting there at the Versailles Palace, and the treaty they gave of peace became the seed for a bigger war later on. The history has shown it recently. So here we have the emphasis on that inward development from the organic limitation to something higher. It is the organic limitation that finds expression as national exclusiveness, racial superiority and violence, and all these other evils afflicting society. When you go beyond the organic limitation, you become infinite in your sympathy, your understanding, universal man you become. That road we have to take. We may not all achieve it fully, but one step in that road is great achievement. That is true education, that all the children of the world be put on that road of their own spiritual growth, development, expansion. We call it in Hindi and Sanskrit, Vyakti Vikasa. Vikasa means expansion. All expansion is life, all contraction is death. Vivekananda said, expand your sympathy. Why tie yourself down in this? So, this particular sentence is very significant in this introduction, which gives you what you can expect for the teachings of the Gita coming later. Vivitho hi vedokto dharma pravritti lakshano nivritti lakshanascha jagatah sthiti karanam praninam sakshat abhyudaya nishreyasa hetu. Sakshat means genuine, real. Abhyudaya nishreyasa, real material welfare, real spiritual welfare. We want material welfare. On poverty, you can't build human civilization. We want food, shelter, clothing, and all the immediate necessities to maintain this body. But it cannot be indefinitely continued. That will create trouble. We are seeing it today. Not only trouble for society and civilization, trouble for the environment. All this breaking down of the ecological balance of the world also comes from that consumerist attitude. So we are having the pressure of all these things on us today. In that context only, we can see the profundity and the wide relevance of the remarks of Shankara in this particular section and the teaching of the Gita coming hereafter. Praninam sakshat abhyudaya nishreyasa hetu. Now this double-edged philosophy was taught to humanity along with the projection of the universe. It continued for some time. People lived accordingly, but slowly degradation came. A fall down came. How? This desire and craving increasing in man. I want more. I want more. I want more. Many people asking for more. Naturally, the strong will win. The weak will suffer. In such a society, morality breaks down. Ethical sense breaks down. So, he says here, Praninam sakshat. This was taught to people and they practiced it for long. But anushtatranam kamodbhavat. In course of time, kama came. Unrestricted, unrestrained craving came in the heart of man for more sensory enjoyment, sensory pleasures. I want this, I want this, I want that. Then what happens? Then kamodbhavat. Vijnana says all that is moral values, ethical values began to suffer in society. By greed, you can destroy the fabric of society. If it is only by a few people, it doesn't matter. If it becomes more widespread, it destroys the fabric of society. Therefore, Indian philosophy speaks of 6 enemies of man. A wonderful classification. Shad Ripu, it is called. 6 enemies. We have so many external enemies, like so many toxins coming from outside, bacteria. We know how to protect ourselves against them by our medical sanitary methods. But there are enemies already lodged up within the human individual. They are very subtle, difficult to detect and handle. It's good to know that these are there. Therefore, they evolved this classification of 6 enemies. Shad Ripu. Shad means 6. Ripu means enemy. And what are they? Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. 6 of them. Kama is craving, desire, simple language, desire. After some limits, it is beautiful. Beyond that limit, it becomes enemy number 1. That enemy gives rise to the second enemy, Krodha, anger, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, greed. I want more, I want more. Whenever you take more, you take from somebody else. There is a limited quantity in the world. Today, so much discussion is going on that 6% of people take away 40% of the world's resources. Even in India, for example, just 6% of Indians take away nearly 40% of the resources of the country, and the rest go to the wall. So, whenever there is this craving beyond the limit, you disrupt the balance of society. People must know this truth. It's absolutely essential. This approach is slowly coming to the consciousness of human beings in the modern age. So, Kama, Krodha, Lobha. 4th is Moha, delusion. Unless you are deluded, you won't do this mistake. Power of discrimination vanishes. So, Moha. Then comes Mada, arrogance, pride. Somewhere they come from. Because of the root from Kama. From there everything comes. Arrogance, Mada. And that will lead to Matsarya, conflict, violence, killing, this and that, and eventually war itself. So, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. These are the 6 enemies of man. Every child must be taught about this possibility within. We must handle them, try to reduce them. Never is it said that you should have no karma, you should have no krodha. They have a place in life, but under control, under limit. So, our Manusmriti says, without karma, there is no action possible. What impels you to act is karma. I want food. That karma makes you practice agriculture. Similarly, I want to have a comfortable life. Therefore, you work hard, earn a little more money. So, karma is essential for action, for welfare. So, karma is not condemned. Karma is perfectly okay. Akamasya kriya nasti is a sentence in Manusmriti. The man who has no karma cannot act, cannot achieve anything. It is the impulsion comes from karma. So karma has a high place in society, but under limit. Krishna says in the Gita, later on you will study it, I am the karma in the heart of all beings, which is unopposed to dharma, unopposed to ethical sense, unopposed to human welfare. When karma is restricted to that level, it is perfectly fine, positive, creative. Therefore, there is no condemnation of karma, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. Within limits, they have a place. Even anger has a place in human society. Whenever you see injustice in society, without anger, you cannot protest against it and take measures to stop it. An indignation comes against it. A righteous indignation, as the McDougall calls it, the Harvard University professor of psychology. So in this way, all these human emotions and feelings and energies within have their own part to play. But here is man trying to discipline them, put them in constructive ways, in channels for the good of all. That is where education comes in, spirituality comes in, everything comes in there. So he said here, when this broke down, karma became a little more excess, so also krodha, so also lobha. Then what happens? That balance becomes upset. The social balance becomes upset. Abhibhuyamane dharme, pravardhamane cha adharme. Dharma becomes overcome. Adharma becomes dominant. Moral values decline. Immorality and exploitation, violence increase. That situation, when it comes, how shall we stabilize society? We are passing through that stage. Even in India today, after all this independence and all that, so much of erosion of values, so much of cheating, so much of violence and crime, so much of bribery, corruption. It's a world phenomenon today. Our teachers tell us that unless we take the matter in our own hands, we cannot handle the subject. A philosophy that helps you to handle these lingering six enemies in you, that philosophy must become operative. By external methods, you cannot improve the human situation. You can improve comfort and pleasure, but not character, conduct and behavior. You cannot make a man moral by an act of parliament. That's a big saying in English. So we need this effort on the part of man, which must come to him or her during the process of education. Today, therefore, our country is discussing value-oriented education. All over the world, this subject is coming, value-oriented education. What exactly is that value? Many people do not know. Here is that insight thrown by the Gita. Shankaracharya points it out, that a concern for others is essential. That cannot come when karma goes beyond its limits, when it becomes unlimited pursuit of pleasure for oneself. Similarly, krodha and other things. So, self-restraint is essential. You need not teach man to express his karma, krodha, lobha. It's a natural trait in him. What you have to teach is how to restrain. Meaning of law in society, criminal and civil law, is restrained. Man is naturally prone to go and rob somebody. You have to restrain him. All law is based on concept of restraint. And so, this teaching must come to man, restrain yourself. Why should the police restrain me? Why not I restrain myself? That is the most beautiful idea that has been hardly emphasized in modern times. Today we need it. A child restraining itself at a certain stage of its own organic development. Why should the police restrain me? Why should the laws restrain me? I shall restrain myself. Long ago, that same Schopenhauer said, man is moral not because he chooses to be so, but because of the fear of police and public opinion. That's why we are moral. That is not morality. Morality is what I feel. When I grow beyond my organic limitation, morality becomes a byproduct of my spiritual growth. What a beautiful idea. Naturally moral, not because somebody is watching me. By myself, I am moral. Now that is the line of human advance, human evolution. So Shankara says, Abhibhuyamane dharme, pravardhamane cha adharme. When dharma becomes overcome by increasing adharma, then the whole society becomes thrown off its balance. The whole world is passing through that stage today. We have to restore the balance once again. How shall we do so? Who will do it? In Indian thought, this work cannot be done by a professor, a scholar, a priest, or anybody else, nor by politics and the state. None of them can achieve this. Only a great spiritual teacher can restore the balance in society. He has achieved that tremendous balance within himself. He is able to convey that energy to society. That's the meaning of the word incarnation, avatara. Shankara is going to tell us in this context that when such a thing happened in ancient times, Krishna appeared, a divine personality, to restore dharma, the balance of moral values in society. This dharma sthapana is the work of the avatara, incarnation. That will be discussed in the 4th chapter of the Gita. But in Indian history, after Krishna came, Buddha, when things were quite bad around us, he restored it by his own achievement of spirituality, his illumination. His first lecture in Sarnath in Benares is described as Dharma Chakra Pravartana. Dharma is compared to a wheel, a cart with a wheel. That wheel has got stuck up in the mud. We have to make it move by tremendous physical pressure. Similarly, the wheel of dharma gets stuck up in worldliness, in self-centeredness, and all the 6 enemies and their evils within man. Then a power must come to make the wheel move. Which is that power? Only a man of high spiritual development can do it. So Buddha said, I am setting in motion the wheel of dharma. What a beautiful discourse. Dharma chakra pravartana. Chakra, symbol is movement. Wheel is a symbol of movement. Wheel is not meant to be kept stagnant somewhere. Wheel means motion, motion, motion. Life is movement. Go on, march on, march on, march on. Then only flowing water is pure. Stagnant water is impure, as we say in our languages. And so, Buddha started that Dharma Chakra Pravartana. And that wheel rolled on, carrying a message of compassion, of love, of purity, which blessed millions of people in India and many other countries as well, including the animals. Hospitals for animals all came from that one message of compassion. Banishing war as an instrument of state policy under Ashoka came as a result of that great setting in motion the wheel of Dharma. These are all 2,300 years ago. Ashoka's time is the 3rd century BC. What wonderful achievements came at that time. But we have got again down, we have gone down. Again great teachers came. Man like Shankaracharya came at that time. And today, when things are in this condition, you will find the same. A new teacher coming, Sri Ramakrishna. Study him. What do you find there? A universal message for stabilizing human civilization and human society. This subject is a very important subject. How we handle social problems, how we make a decadent society healthy once again, where concept of a great teacher comes, spiritual teacher, whom two religions call avatara, incarnation, namely Christianity and Hinduism. Others do not call avatara, but they accept the power of a great spiritual teacher to stabilize human conditions, improve the morals of a people. This concept is so important. We shall deal with it next Sunday when we meet here. We'll spend a minute in silence and meditation and then disperse.